Well, welcome. We're working out our AV issues. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Jason King with Dover Cole & Partners. Let's see, we've got 3 more people who are trying to sign on. Let's give them just a second. Okay, we've got 21 participants. Everyone who is trying to sign on has been able to sign on. What we're going to do is we're going to record this presentation and put it on the website for the project. So Rob or Allie, if you want to start recording, great. All right, so welcome back. My name is Jason King, again with Dover Cole & Partners, and I'm the project director of a very talented multidisciplinary consultant team working with Sierra Norte Development on the Mesa Vista project. And all of our work is being put up on the MesaVistaMasterPlan.com website if you have not been there yet. We're gonna, this presentation is a work in progress. So it's not complete, but it will finish the virtual charrette that we've been engaged in for the last week. After this, this goes on the website. We continue to take comments and feedback and to meet with people as we create a synthesis plan. And then after that, once we've got a plan that it feels like everybody's excited about and can agree on, at least, then we move into the approval process. We continue to refine the plan as we work with elected officials, and then the plan becomes adopted. And it's a long-term process. A couple things to keep in mind. One is that we're going to show a very large plan on 800 acres. It is 10 to 15 years before something like that is fully built out. The approval process alone can take years and years more before the bulldozers start. So planning takes time, but we've been working with the public over the last couple months, and hopefully we've got something that people are looking forward to. Now, this week was the Charrette week, and we had a series of open studios, technical meetings, stakeholder meetings, meetings with the public. We had open houses, and this is our work in progress presentation. And just looking at the names of people tonight, I can see that a lot of you have joined us through the whole event, and you'll see your ideas in this presentation. And basically the way it's been working is our designers have been in the meetings and listening, and I might have been talking, but they were listening, and what we heard from the public, we were translating into plan. So just a few slides of recap. Mesa Vista is located on Highway 70 near the Oregon Mountains High School, east of downtown Las Cruces. And the site is quite large in total, and there's 3 different kinds of ownerships and leases on this property. But if we take it all in total, it's over 800 acres, which makes this really kind of very, very important. This is epic, like the young people say. This is historical. This is really, really important that we get this right. 800 acres is a lot. It'll change life on the east side of the city. Now, our work has been guided by several plans. Our firm has been working in Las Cruces for a long time, and we got to be one of the firms that worked on the Elevate Las Cruces comprehensive plan. And that was really exciting because, you know, this conversation we've had this week, well, we've all been talking for a while. And there was a point a year ago before COVID where we were all around the table and we were working on Elevate Las Cruces. Half Associates was the prime consultant. Dover Cole led the public charrette, and we learned a lot at that point, and hope you see that in the plan. The city's also been working on the active transportation plan and the parks and recreational master plan. the ARROYO management plan, and to be revealed shortly, the climate adaptation plan, which the city will begin talking about in October. What we've tried our best to do is to make this project a demonstration of the plan principles in each one of those plans, and specific strategies and action items that are in those plans are evident here and will be built and become a built reality. Let's just look at the Elevate Las Cruces comprehensive plan. There's a future development map. We look at that and we see an area, quite a large area, dedicated for rural reserve and rural neighborhood. You'll see that reflected in the plan. And then the thing that got us really excited about this project, that there's a town center. Elevate Las Cruces is a really good and sort of best practice in planning. So it's presenting centers, recognizing that people need walkable mixed-use locations in their community, and it placed a center on this spot just south of the high school. And this is to be the center for community life on the east side, and that's what got us excited. We've been talking to you all for a while, and let me tell you the results of some of the interactions that we've had. Now, the website has an Engage tab, and that Engage tab is going to stay open and stay active, and you're welcome to continue to answer the questions, the polls, and the surveys, and to give your feedback. Up to this point, about a little over 40 people have filled out the one-word card. One word that comes to mind about Mesa Vista area now and in the future. They entered in one word for now and into the future. And this is a word cloud. The more times someone answered the same word, the larger it appears. You see natural and pristine. You see beautiful. You see peaceful. You see community, small. You also see barren and boring and underutilized and isolated and unclear. So you see room for improvement. One word that comes to mind about the Mesa Vista area in the future, and that word community got really, really large. So did walkable and integrated and open. And at the same time, the other side of the coin, you see traffic and congested. You see cost of living, concern and pollution, poor infrastructure. And so you see fears, about the future also. Online, there's a community image survey, and people are basically able to rank and say what images they like the best. And these are the top images. Many of you have seen these before. They've remained consistent with a couple new ones. And these are the images that you're going to see in the plan and in the project. Separated bike lanes, nature trail, neighborhood square, playgrounds and active parks, local restaurant, neighborhood coffee shop. These are the things people are looking forward to. And we showed them a list of a whole range of different kinds of housing type and ways of living. The courtyard bungalows, these small, and in this case, Spanish Revival bungalows ranked very high. And so did the single family home, and especially this one in the Pueblo style. And consistent, this image, CVS with all kinds of glaring signage. No, not so much. No one's interested in that. And all of these images have implications for the designers. We've been listening to this, and it's affected the plan. Now, there's also a spot where people have been answering the questions and entering information. And there's a lot, but some of the ones just to pick out. Talking about the urban heat effect and the need for green infrastructure and shade trees, cool roofs, and cool pavement to reduce air temperatures. The courtyard bungalows were popular, and people described growing up and fondly remembering the courtyard bungalows of Las Cruces, or courtyard bungalows in other places in the Southwest or on the West Coast where they'd vacation. And this is just a building type that we don't see very much anymore. I'd like to be able to park and then bike with my kids. All of these are responses from the public. Connect to the regional trail network from the river to the mountains. Walkable schools. We've worked on this for a long time, and there are handbooks out there that we hope you take a look at. Pickleball comes up a lot, and it's extremely popular. And and pickleball needs to be part of this project. I want to see better restaurants. I want more sit-down restaurants. My main concern is traffic safety. Don't gate it. I like the idea of having a place to walk my dog. Quite often, a lot of people, when they think of what this project can do for life on the east side, they're most excited about hiking and bike trails. Now, we did some draft scenarios for the site, and we let people vote on them. There's conventional development and two versions of what we call creative development. And both versions of creative development are what we call smart growth. And there was a film talking about it, and people were able to vote. And you see that it's gone up and down. But right now, where it stands, after over 80 people have answered the poll, 73% of people like creative development, 73% like creative development 2, 19% like creative development 1, and 8% the conventional development. So the conventional development, take the land development regulations off the shelf and build it stuff, people are not interested in. And that brings us to a very important point. In order for this to work, we're going to show a lot of great images, and most of it is illegal, not even possible to build under the current regulations. Not all of it, some of it is allowed, but it's certainly not incentivized or made easy. This development has to pursue what's called a plan unit development. And a plan unit development is when planners are able to engage with the public and create something new and different. And that'll be necessary. It's more flexible than conventional zoning. And where conventional zoning parcels everything out, it puts things together. And where things are really put together, most especially, is the town center. And we asked them, what level of investment for the town center, public and private investment? And 64% of people said, in effect, go big, creative development 2, a regional town center, as opposed to just something local and locally serving. They're interested in something grand and exciting and will draw people from other places. Now, it's hard to summarize the conversation we've had over the last week, even in just 5 ideas, but these are the basic ideas, the big 5 ideas that came out of the project, and they sort of become the chapters for this presentation. New development should be compatible and respectful of context. In terms of context, people talked about the neighborhoods that are west, north, south, and east of the project. They talked about liking a large green plaza and heights that transition down. A lot of concern about traffic and about where the water moves after land development. And those aren't answered tonight. A detailed traffic impact analysis is necessary. First, you create a vision, and then you have something to measure. Also, a detailed stormwater plan will be necessary to answer questions about where all of the water goes to. Comply with dark sky protections and control light pollution, neighborhood buffers, monument to Pat Garrett, protect neighborhood views, the existing views, abide by all the plans that everyone has been working on for so long, connect Mesa Avenue to Highway 70 for additional network, and use quality builders and build well or don't build at all. Mesa Vista should offer an attractive, vibrant new center on the east side, create a gateway to the city, and also from one side, and create a gateway to the national monuments and parks, and a base camp to all the outdoor activities that are possible. Create Instagrammable postcard views, and there's a long list of uses that don't exist on the east side that people were interested in. Farmers market and groceries, brewery, healthy farm to table restaurants, a deli for packed lunches, hiking apparel, shared workspace, spas, a retreat center, recreational center, and new compact walkable mixed use development. And don't fail. People were talking about how things are different in New Mexico and in Las Cruces. It's not like everywhere else. It's a unique culture. It's one of independence and strong connection to the environment. And so, and then there's also now, of course, we've seen pandemic, and that will affect, even when there's a vaccine, that's going to affect how we interact, how we shop, how we work. And the public was saying, don't fail, take all this into consideration. Safe, comfortable, and interesting streets for walking and biking. Increase access to nature and recreation, and build sustainably. And sustainable had a lot of different meanings: economic, environmental, design, conservation. Neighborhoods protect the major arroyos and minor finger arroyos, which are often just bulldozed in the subdivision process. Trees, arroyos as public space with trailheads, places to park and then get into nature. A canopy of drought-tolerant trees with desert willows or trees that are native and don't require much water. An understory of desert plants. And then do all this, you know, prosper, succeed, create a thriving community, but still an affordable one. The best way to keep things affordable is to meet the demand with new supply. And the average household should be able to afford the average unit. This is an area with such great views and such a pristine natural environment, could all be luxury homes and gates. And people were saying, no, provide units for everyone, provide units for lower income people by working with nonprofit builders, increase home ownership and build business ownership, and support the city's affordable housing efforts. Each of the elected officials that we talked to said the city has an affordability problem, help us with that. And that's part of the plan. Now, let's open up the polls. 3 times tonight, we're gonna ask you some questions. The first set of questions is about who's here and attending virtually. And then we'll ask about some of the proposals. And then at the very end, the interesting part, we're gonna ask everybody, is the plan headed in the right direction? Rob?
So the first 2 questions will come up together. The first one is, did you participate in the virtual site visit? It was the week of August 13th, August 12th, 13th, and 14th. And the second question is, have you participated in any of the other Charrette events this week, whether that was one of the technical meetings, this week's virtual kickoff meeting, or one of the open studios? So I'm going to launch the polling. A separate window will pop up on your screen. If you did participate earlier with us this week, you may have had some practice with this. And then you'll simply click on the little circle next to the answer you'd like to select. So I'm going to launch the polling now. Right, and the window should have popped up, and you should see the 2 questions. And we're getting some responses.
And just so you know, the host and the participants, I mean, the host and the panelists, the people that you see in the windows are not voting. It's really just members of the public.
All right, let's give it 5 more seconds. I think that's everyone. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Right, so now you should have in the pop-up window, you should see the results from those 2 questions. So for the first one, did you participate in the virtual site visit? About 2/3 did not, so that's great that you're here and learning more about the project and providing your thoughts and comments and ideas on what you'd like to see in this area. And for the second question, have you participated in any of the other Charrette events this week? More than 80% have, so that's great. We had a lot of participants and a lot of people from the community come out and join in a lot of the different meetings. And hopefully you'll be able to see a lot of your comments and concerns addressed in the material tonight. And we also have some people that this is their first time attending any of the Charrette events. So we're glad you're able to make it. And again, as Jason mentioned, the presentation is recorded, will be recorded and is being recorded and will be on the website. So if you have other people in your community or friends that you'd like to share it with, you'll be able to do so online. All right, I think that's it for the questions for now.
So what we'll do, we'll have myself and Rob and the design team go through each of the big ideas. New development should be compatible and respectful of context. And in every one of the conversations we had, we talked about dark sky lighting. This is a picture of the same house. You know, in the sky, the light is treated differently. On the right, glaring bright lights shining in every direction, and on the left, not that. If there are outdoor lights, they're cast down, and the experience of New Mexico is one of the Milky Way and stars and clear, cool evenings. And so people understand that with development, you could get glare. And they were talking about how with light fixtures alone, you're able to reduce a lot of it. With dark sky lighting, you're casting it down right where you need it. Or there could be low bollards and light is on a very low level. Or there could even be small LED lights along pathways that do not shine up into the air. LED, dark sky lighting is all of that, but it's also just less street lights and parking lights, less big Cobra head parking lights in parking lots to minimize glare and to reduce light pollution. The quality and kind of light is also important, minimizing the blue light. And this allows, you know, it saves money and also allows the natural biorhythms of the desert to go on. It makes things safe if you're able to focus the light to where people need to see. And through dark sky, you're able to acclimate people, acclimate their sight, and they're less likely to have problems moving around at night. So what we need to do, part of the project, is to create a code for this site, and that code would take the dark sky principles and make it the law. As development happens, it would have to follow the code. We also heard a lot from people about the different species that are out in the desert. And you know, as development encroaches in a lot of ways up toward the higher grounds, these animals are pushed out. And it can create problems for both humans and for the animals. And so people were talking about the species to look out for and ways that development in the Las Cruces area has been a good neighbor. And one of them is the Arroyo crossing. Some way, you know, the arroyos, the dry stream beds, are wildlife corridors, and they go all the way from downtown up through and into the mountains. And if they are walls, then it's a lot harder. And wildlife comes up the wall and finds itself in a dangerous position with cars. So wherever we cross the Alameda Arroyo, the major arroyo on this site, people were talking about providing box culverts, essentially tunnels for nature to pass through. It's also interesting to look at Las Alturas. Talking to local biologists, we learned about the concept of a wildlife interface zone. This is a place where development is handled differently. It's often large lot. It's often natural landscaping. The homes are set back, and the streets themselves are more narrow. Where there are parks, they're naturalistic, and you have the creosote and the pine trees. There's the prickly pear cactus, and there's a lot less turf grass and bougainvillea and palm trees in these areas. And you know, in some ways, just by keeping the landscaping natural, people know that they're in a different kind of environment. And so there's things we can do as designers in this wildlife interface zone. And there's also quite a bit that can happen in terms of education and educating people that are on the edge and on the periphery, how to protect the health of wildlife, give space to wildlife, and protect the health of people too. So these can all be, you know, the code is regulations, but they can also be an educational piece. So this is the illustrative plan, and let me show you how this works. This is our latest draft. Now, it's just the first draft, and there's quite a bit of work that still has to happen. However, you'll see that a lot has changed since the last time we presented it, and a lot has changed since our scenario. We took the information we got from the scenario voting, and we started to create a synthesis plan. And then we started to imagine a zoning system. We call it transects, and instead of a strict separation of uses, transects work with more gradation, just like we used to build places before. So you see a draft. You see where the town center could be. You see where smaller homes or attached homes might be, single family units, and then the large lot houses. You see park space and open space. You see at this point over 16 miles of trail and over 25% open space total on the site, even though the regulations really just require about 11%. And then there is the green of the T2. This green is the area that I was describing. These are the wildlife protection areas. These are the areas that are on the edge. They're the most likely to affect the natural system around it. These are the areas where the plants that you plant and the activities of your animals, your pets, are going to affect what happens in the natural world. And so these would be handled differently than the rest. We're going to refer to the plan several times in this presentation, help you understand what this shows two-dimensionally by talking about our conversation and how it's reflected in the plan. But in short, you know, the plan is the white of streets, the colored areas for where buildings would go, and then the greens showing parks, open spaces, and protected places. And everything is divided up based on neighborhoods, you know. Great cities, great places are a collection of neighborhoods. Paris is a collection of 16 neighborhoods. And the people there talk less about the city and talk more about their neighborhoods. They think in terms of their walk and their commute and their daily life. So what we do is we draw out 1,320 feet. That's a 5-minute walk. That's the walk a person is likely to take, after which they're more inclined to get into a car. And the more we can provide within each one of these pedestrian circles, the more we're able to encourage walking and biking. And with a really good environment, you know, people are willing to walk 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. People can walk comfortably a mile or 2 miles. But this allows us to create compact and complete new neighborhoods. And you see at the center of each of the neighborhoods is a green, and quite often we're recommending attached dwelling multifamily that would make it feel like a center. The center is the denser place in a new community. You can see the town center up here and extending down through this area. And you can see that each one of these areas has a clearly defined center and edge. The second big idea is Mesa Vista should offer an attractive, vibrant new center on the east side. And that, we've shown this graphic, you know, instead of one use after another separated by a sea of parking, red for retail, blue for institutional, yellow for office, orange for residential, what traditional neighborhood development, something we call new urbanism, works to do is to take those pieces and put them together. And this is that. This is the first pass of the town center. It combines creative development 1 and creative development 2. The geometries of the streets and the blocks look very similar, but we've had more time to work on the specific design. Myself personally, James Doherty, one of our designers, Kenneth Garcia, who was working on plan and renderings, really the whole team, Pam, Ali, Rob, Sue, Victor, everybody's been participating in the creation of the center in order to get it right. You see an interconnected network of streets. You see small walkable blocks. You see a lot of green to handle the water, and you see connections to the neighborhoods west and south, east and north. And if we zoom in, you can take a look at how it really looks. At the very, very center could be something like a gazebo or a monument. And you know, throughout the Southwest, there are plazas or placitas, and quite often there's a gazebo at the middle, and there's paths for people to walk, and there's shade, and they're fronted by buildings like the ones that you see here that Kenneth designed and modeled. And you see that in spots, it's a manicured green, and in other spots, the land is left largely untouched, best that is possible. When we zoom out just a bit, still see the gazebo. We're starting to see the entire plaza. And then you see the soft trees. Maybe it's acacia or Valencia, or maybe it's Palo Verde or desert willow. And they're planted with enough space so that way their roots are able to grow and they're able to take in water. And from this plaza, you see small courtyards. The trees grow slow, and they tend to be fragile and willowy. What we try to do is to make sure the buildings can provide as much shade as possible, such that if you're in this courtyard space, and if these buildings and parapets are tall enough, you are in the shade for most of the day. And you also have a feeling of being in a comfortable outdoor room. We zoom out one bit more, and you see Mesa Central Drive. This is an existing roadway that runs through. And we zoom out one more time, and you can see Mesa Grande. And I think the beauty of this design is that there is a plaza, but there's also the small courtyards. This courtyard is sort of the first increment of Hispanic and Mexican and Spanish architecture, the very small courtyard fronted by buildings. And then you see the larger green spaces, you see larger greens. Very rare, and probably maybe never at all is there turf grass, but there are trees that are planted, low water, drought tolerant, appropriate trees. And then you see, as you zoom out even further, that there's a transition. The town center is more than just where there's restaurants and commercial and workplaces. The town center are also the homes on the edge, which people are able to walk to from the center and walk from in order to get to the center without using a car. So the center is both the plazas and the placitas, and it's also all the homes that are connected. The other interesting thing that you see is, every once in a while, the street doesn't have to be one that has cars. You have the paseo or the passageway that would take you from one courtyard space or plaza to another. And these are the areas where you find, trendy restaurants with Edison bulb lights and polished concrete floors and chalkboard menus. These are the places where you would find life and excitement and opportunities to socialize. We talked a lot about gateway and what's one's first impression. The first impression that you have of a city is unshakably tied to what you see as soon as you cross that line, and the memory that you have of a place can be based upon that first impression, and it's important to get that right. And so what the plan attempts to do is facing Highway 70 is a plaza. And you can see into this, and you can see that something different is happening there. Now, all throughout Las Cruces in the downtown used to be great storefronts like these. And they were proud, and there was glass, and there was awnings and galleries shading the pedestrians. There's very few left. They're still there, and they're seeing a revival. But you can learn from buildings like that. A walk must be safe, comfortable, but also interesting. And the glass and the ability to look at the things for sale or the people inside those windows keep town centers interesting places. And so with the code, we would require storefronts like this. The smallest increment, again, is just the small plaza. And here's the galleries like used to be in the downtown. And the downtown now has outdoor dining, and it's back. And it's important to be very deliberate about, if you're asking people to be outside, you've got to be very conscientious, careful about the design of the outdoor environment. Otherwise, it's too hot or too windy or too sandy. The great thing about the three-sided plaza is that it's got a high level of enclosure, it's blocking the wind, it's creating shade, and it's cooling down the area. I'm really excited about this. These projects take a long time to develop, but this wouldn't, you can imagine in the next 5 years or so, a small courtyard like this, bordered by 3 different buildings. And that's enough to create town center to start it off. We'll talk about the neighborhoods. As you move from the town center down through the plan, it can't look like this. It can't, the dominant visual image can't be garages, and it can't be curb cuts which break up the sidewalk, and it can't be treeless. This is not a walkable environment or an interesting one or even a safe one. There's no eyes on the street. It's got to be something a little bit more like this. On-street parking creates a barrier that makes the pedestrian feel safe. Street trees cast shade, planting strips for the trees to get water, sidewalks for people to walk down, and every once in a while in certain areas, it's ideal to have the front porches within conversation distance of the sidewalk and casting shade onto the sidewalk. There's still garages and there's still plenty of places to park like this, but by virtue of design, it's less intrusive and it feels like a place where people want to be. And there's several different approaches that you take in order to do this. Parking tucked discreetly behind a layer of the habitable space. You divide the lot into different layers and you say no parking in the first layer. In this diagram by James Doherty, he created a possible block, and then he showed how the pedestrian realm, the space in between buildings, can be a comfortable space. Buildings are close to the sidewalk to provide shade. Driveway curb cuts are kept narrow and to minimize sidewalk interruptions. Street trees and on-street parking, and on corner lots, and every once in a while, the parking doesn't even have to be located directly at the center. It could actually be in the very back of the lot. And if you're able to do this, then you're able to create, again, best you can, continuous sidewalks. In other places, something more is required. On the most prominent greens, the places that see the most pedestrian traffic, parking is handled in the back, either by a parking lot or by use of a residential alley. So that way the sidewalks are completely unbroken up. If we look at the overall plan in terms of the town center, regional park, you can see the multiple neighborhood centers. And then here's the ARROYO areas, which continue throughout. These paths, these trails, quite often on the ridge of the ARROYO, and we'll talk more about that in a second, sometimes provide an even quicker and more direct route from point A to point B. It might make sense some days just to walk and not to drive. The paths are not just parallel the streets, although quite a few of these streets would have, in fact, one of the rules of walkable urbanism is that every street should have a place for cars, a place for pedestrians, and a place for cyclists. And then even better, these routes that would connect you from one place to another. And this is my last point before we, for others, present the other points. We're doing all this, we're creating a beautiful town center, and at the same time, affordability. And there's many different definitions for affordable housing. It tends to be HUD, Housing and Urban Development, wing of the federal government, talks about housing is affordable if a family spends no more than 30% of their income to live there. So there's money for sending the kids to college or for recreation on the weekends. There's money for holidays and for hobbies and for food and clothing, and only 30% of income goes towards housing. And that's a great rule of thumb. And now one of the issues in our country is that there's just not enough housing. The supply needs to be increased. And one issue in Las Cruces and a lot of other cities is that there are large areas that are zoned, that are marked for commercial or for workplaces or for offices, and they just are not arriving. And as you drive the big roads of Las Cruces, you find these vast open spaces waiting for something to happen. And sometimes that's because the land development regulations have frozen them in place. What we need to do is change the regulations in order to unlock potential in those sites. Instead of waiting for a Target or a Whataburger or a Burger King, these are places where we could actually build nice places to live. Now they're close to the highway, and so quite often what you want to do is enclose it with a green, so that way the front door is not facing the highway, and the front door is not facing the parking lot either. There needs to be ample parking, and what Stacy King did in her design is she alternated green space, parking, and the green spaces were fronted by these buildings, and it creates these little oases of shade and comfort all throughout the corridor. And the noise and the dust is mitigated by virtue of these small little places for things to happen. And it shouldn't all be residential. She also found spots, especially around the town center, where it would make sense for it to be commercial, the gateway experience. The other concept that people talked about was, as I said, these small bungalows, neighborhood clusters, groups of homes that share the green space. This is the formula that we saw up on Highway 70, and throughout the project, you can imagine more of these. And they're just small, modest, maybe it's a starter home or a retirement home, but it's a dignified place. It's been designed well, and the architecture is pleasant and agreeable. Throughout the project, you see this is the transect. This is the zoning in small, and you see that there is the center, and there's actually the core of life. There's the center area, general, edge, and the green space. You build densely over here, and you're able to have spaces like the ARROYOs left free on the side, and variety. And Rob will show more about this later on, but with a single walk along the single street, quite often you're moving from an urban area to a much more rural area. This is an image we've shown throughout the charrette. People like it a lot. And it shows attached houses and single family houses and small single family houses, a small neighborhood park, the safe little parks that are most used by locals. And people walk to these parks. It shows accessory dwelling units and front porches. This is the kind of image, this is the kind of rendering that puts it all together. For us, our job is to take a rendering like this and create a plan that allows for it, that mixes the different units. So that way on the same street, as I said, there's townhouses and duplexes, there's cottages, there's houses, large houses, and even estate houses all throughout. Two more big ideas. Let me pass this to Rob and the team.
Thanks, Jason. Just gonna start sharing. All right. So as Jason mentioned, streets need to be safe, comfortable, and also interesting places for walking and biking. And what makes a street interesting for walking in many cases is exactly what Jason was talking about before, having a mix of building types and a changing scene. As you walk from place to place, your view changes, the experiences around you change, and it's generally just a more interesting experience. So here's a close-up view of the illustrative plan with areas showing the town center that we were showing earlier in the presentation. And if we zoom into this red area, we have a sample of what could be if this area is to be built out. You can see the different colored buildings represent a broad range of housing types. So orange could be small apartment buildings, yellow could be small townhouses, the gray colors are smaller homes on smaller lots, 35 feet, 50 feet. And then the pink color represents the larger houses, lots on 60 feet, 70 feet, 100 feet, and even bigger. And so as you walk down one of these streets, your experience will change along the way. From multifamily housing to smaller homes to bigger homes. And then you come to the ARROYOs, spaces left preserved in their natural state, and then into even larger homes. And this typically runs from the center of the neighborhood here or around a small plaza out to the edge along Mesa Avenue, where we have more of the natural environment and the larger homes and buildings. On the website, we asked, did you walk to school as a child at any point? And this is the result that we got. And it's not really that surprising. Over 80% of the people said, yes, they did. Now, if you were to ask that same question to students today, we expect the answer to be inverted, probably around 80%, if not 90 or even 100% of the students saying that they do not walk to school today. And there's a number of reasons for this, but a big reason for that is because how schools are designed today. Go back 30, 50 years, schools were smaller, located centrally in their neighborhoods. They were brought close to the street, and they were a part of the community, a civic feature and something that people were proud of and used for more things than just classrooms. Community events could be held there. The sports fields can be used for community recreation. And they also, while they had parking, it wasn't surrounded by parking. And the streets that led to them could be a little narrower, a little safer for walking, sidewalks, and bike lanes. And so the image shown here is a typical school that we see today. And it's not really a question why many people don't drive or don't walk, and they do drive if they have that option. But schools don't have to be designed this way. They can be designed as an integral part of the neighborhood and connected with the surrounding community. They can become key civic features with key green spaces and still provide plenty of parking for those that need to drive, but they also can be safer and more interesting places, adding variety to a neighborhood that would otherwise just be small or large single-family homes. And the size of the school can also remain quite large, but with careful design, it can become a more integrated and cohesive part of the neighborhood. When we look at the plan for Mesa Vista, we have quite a bit of streets connecting all the different neighborhoods and the blocks into the surrounding developments in Highway 70. And there'll be a wide variety of street types in the ultimate build out of the plan. The existing streets, Highway 70 in the north, Northrise Drive ending along the western border, and tiny bits of Mesa Grande Drive and some new streets in Mesa Grande Estates. But a variety of street types will provide key connections for traffic, making sure they have the capacity needed to prevent congestion or limit congestion, safe places for walking, safe places for biking, and smaller, more intimate streets throughout the neighborhoods. And then along the edges of the arroyos, special conditions can exist for creating and capturing the scenery that exists. And in the wildlife interface zones and other more rural parts of the development, streets can take on a more rural character. On the opposite side of the spectrum, in the town center areas, streets should have a more urban character, perhaps curbless, perhaps a little narrower, in places that really focus on the vitality of having commerce and outside dining and building upon the renderings shown earlier. Here's just a sample section of what one of the larger arterial roads, such as Northrise Drive or Mesa Grande, could look like. While it's likely to change throughout the design process as you get more feedback from members of the community and engineering staff, the key features will remain. The drive lanes for traffic, plenty of space for trees and other native vegetation, as well as to manage stormwater in a more natural, sustainable way, and places for walking and biking. The Elevate Las Cruces plan requires all arterials and collectors to have walking and biking facilities. However, many times they end up just being 4 or 5 extra feet next to the moving vehicles that can be traveling 40 miles per hour and more, which really isn't safe and isn't comfortable for most cyclists. So instead, we're proposing to put side paths along these major roads that are separated with trees to offer some protection, as well as plenty of space to make a comfortable and interesting place to bike and walk. And here's another sample of just what can be done on a slightly smaller street section. one of the most important parts of the plan is increasing access to nature and recreation and building sustainably. We've shown this image quite a few times throughout the Charrette week, and it's got mixed feelings. Most people like it. Others have concerns over whether or not this type of path would be ideal in all settings, as well as how close the buildings are. So over the course of the week, our designers, Sue Zhang, has been working on revising this and creating a new image of what trails could look like along a protected arroyo. And the site today is really quite beautiful. It's only 8 miles away from the Oregon Mountains, and there's a lot of native plants and landscaping that exists. Creosote bush, mesquite tree, tar brush. And so a large part of the plan is really to protect this existing environment and to turn it into an amenity for those that are living in terms of use, as well as visitors and those in adjacent neighborhoods that want to come and walk on some of the trails or walk to the town center so they can also experience the natural environment. The active transportation plan was recently adopted by the city of Las Cruces, and it shows a network of hiking and biking trails that disperse from downtown Las Cruces and go outwards in all directions, including east towards the Oregon Mountains, and coming really close, and in some cases, crossing through the site. So you can see in this image, the red star represents the location of Mesa Vista. So the active transportation plan proposes regional bike facility running through the site, and there's some hiking and walking trails that come close. And so the trail network that's being developed for Mesa Vista will have to connect to the hiking and biking trails proposed in the active transportation plan, not just for recreation, but also as a mobility option for those that want to get to other neighborhoods, or even if they're more adventurous, all the way to downtown. At the larger regional scale, there's the Monumental Loop, which is a 350-mile bikepacking trail. People will come from out of state and all over the world with their bikes, and they'll carry with them their supplies and tents and gear that they need, and they can do a really beautiful loop that takes in all the scenery of the Las Cruces area. And this actually crosses right through the town center and diagonally through the entire Mesa Vista site. So it's a real opportunity to provide a safe place for people to bike, as well as amenities for them to on their way. So if they need to stop to pick up supplies, or stop for a drink, or stop to just enjoy not being out in the middle of nowhere for a brief moment, this trail and this neighborhood of Mesa Vista can really build upon the base camp type of experience. And trails are already being built in Las Cruces. The Camino Real Middle School has a trail adjacent to it, running parallel to the Arroyo. And the built segment is a little small, but it's something that's part of a larger plan network that will connect to Mesa Vista. So here in yellow, you can see the outlines of the parcels that make up Mesa Vista. And then the existing segment of the Camino Real Middle School Trail. So while this is outside of the boundaries of the plan, it's still important to think about and plan for the connections from Mesa Vista to the to the elementary schools, as well as to recreation facilities that are planned in other areas of the city. Las Cruces also adopted the Parks and Rec Master Plan just a year ago. And it provides for pocket parks, civic parks, large open spaces and natural areas, and everything in between. Parks are not just a key feature of the plan, but they were also how we started designing the plan. Picking out the areas that should be protected and preserved were the things that we did first, and that was the arroyos. So if we zoom into one of the arroyos, which is the dominant landscape feature in the area, we see the Alameda Arroyo, which runs east-west across Mesa Vista and goes all the way towards downtown. It's a key drainage feature, a key wildlife corridor, and provides a lot of habitat and native plant species. The plan is preserving the Arroyo 100-year floodplain. You can see in the lighter tan color that throughout the entire area, those are protected. And in addition to that, the plans proposing a 50 to 100 foot buffer. And within that buffer is where the trail network will occur. And this is following the city's ARROYO management plan, which calls for the protection of these arroyos as well as trails in the buffer and pushing development outside of the buffer, safer from flooding water and safe from meandering channels. And also creates a lot of open space and the natural areas called for in the city's Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And these form part of a comprehensive network of park and civic spaces throughout the entire site, ranging from smaller town center plazas all the way up to the larger natural open spaces and everything in between. Regional parks, 4 acres in size, and smaller pocket parks in neighborhood centers, neighborhood plazas, located in each of the different neighborhoods that make up Mesa Vista, as well as the wildlife interface zone that stretches across some of the areas that are within the rural portion of Mesa Vista as designated by the Elevate Las Cruces master plan. So now I'd like to turn it over to our landscape designer, Sue Zhang, to talk about a little more specifics on tree types and plant types, as well as go into details on some of the parks and trails. Sue?
Okay, thanks, Rob. Rob, I cannot stop video, but are you going to, am I able to advance the slides or I have to talk to you?
Let me know when, and I'll
okay.
advance the slide.
Okay, great. Yeah, so as Jason and Rob mentioned earlier, we have considered about the desert climate, and water conservation is definitely a very big concern for us. So here are a range of different plants that are drought tolerant that could be good options for street trees. Next. So there are more desert planting palette for the lower level, the shrubs and the ground covers. Next, please. Next, please. Okay. All right. So these are also the typical the plants we often see along the ARROYO corridor that could be good candidates for us to integrate into the design as well. Next slide. So even though Las Cruces is in a very arid desert climate, but the rainfall can be really intense in a very short period of time. And so flash flooding is a concern for the neighbors. So as Rob talked about earlier in the ARROYO management plan, we not only keep all the arroyos on site, we also designate additional 50 to 100 feet buffer along the arroyo, and that can mitigate the overflow flooding from the drainage channel. There are also a variety of other green infrastructure techniques we can incorporate into our design to not only manage the water, but also make sure the water quality is addressed. And here are a few of the common techniques that we can apply, like street trees, bioretention, pervious paving, and swales, and etc. Next, please. Here is a section showing in detail how the housing development, the relationship between the development and ARROYO. So this is showing the blue color is showing the ARROYO flood zone, and then the green area is showing the additional 50 to 100 feet buffer that we're keeping. And the trail happens within those buffer zone. And then the next layer will be the development. Next, please. So here is a rendering showing in detail how it can work in a typical house that's facing the arroyo. Next slide, please. So the label is just showing a few features that we're looking at. So the garden in the foreground is shown as a community garden, but this could also be a garden path or a pocket park that creates fingers of green space that connects people from the adjacent neighborhood to the Arroyo Trail. It also creates a connected green network where people can bike and walk. It also works as a great community gathering place for you to know your neighbors. But we are keeping the natural character of the Arroyo Trail to have very minimal impact along the Arroyo. So the trail paving is shown as natural materials, either compacted earth or gravel. Next image, please. And here is zooming back, and we're looking at the bigger plan and showing a bit of the showing the screen network that we talked about earlier. So we're designing the landscape to be a connected and integrated network. Next slide, please. So here is showing a very, very early and conceptual design for a regional neighborhood park, because we talk about pocket parks and neighborhood parks that serve the immediate neighbors, but there are also parks that that cater to a larger community. And this could be a place where people connect to nature, but also a place for people to know each other. And we listed several programmings that we have heard so far this week that are really popular places for people to go. People like the idea of water, and people love splash pads because the hot and arid weather. And Jason mentioned earlier, there are wildlife interface zones that there are certain zones that we want to keep the pets and animals, keep the pets away from the wildlife, but there are also places we want the animals the pets can run freely. So there's dog park and also detention pond that can address the runoff issue. I think that's the last slide, right?
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks.
One of the more interesting ideas that had come up was the idea of a spa and resort, and this really builds upon the area's outstanding beauty and natural amenities. So we're looking at the possibility for a spa and resort to be located in the southeastern portion of the plan, somewhere that's close to the edge, views towards the Oregon Mountains, and something that's also along one of the Arroyo channels. And this can be a place that focuses on health and wellness, outdoor yoga, can have small guest rooms or lodging. And it can also be a place for people in the community and surrounding developments and neighborhoods, as well as really anyone in Las Cruces to come to and to enjoy little rest and relaxation, as well as taking advantage of the geothermal waters that are located below Las Cruces and below the site. So there's possibilities for mud pools and other hot spring types of amenities. And while there's going to be a variety of parks at a variety of sizes located throughout the entire plan, it's always important that buildings and development face the park. You can see in this image that by doing so, it creates an intimate and comfortable space for people to gather in that can be shaded from the buildings, and also ensures that people living or working in these spaces can help watch the activity happening in the park. And so the parks don't feel like they're unwatched or isolated, but that they're parts of the community and parts of the neighborhood. And so when you step out of your home, you'll be able to see the park and you won't also have homes that are actually within the park and can result in having some strange issues with, are you in your space, are you in public space or private space? And so this really helps to clearly define what's park and what's private spaces. So again, just want to iterate just how the neighbors or how the neighborhoods are shaped by the arroyos and park spaces. And within each of the neighborhoods, there's a variety of other park and civic spaces, from the smaller plazas at the center to the regional parks and community centers. All right, so now we'll have a few more polling questions before we get to the final slides. And so these will be around 6 of them. And how the work is, I'm going to show an image like this. And just based on your reaction of everything you've heard about it and your understanding of the plan, we'll launch the poll and we'll ask, what do you think of this idea? Do you love it, not sure yet, or you don't like it? And for each of these images, I'll have a new pop-up window. That way, you'll be able to see the screen and see the image before it gets hidden by the floating question window. So if you hold on 1 minute, I'm going to launch the first poll. All right, so same as before, you just click the little circle next to the response that you'd like to submit.
And then people are asking, what's the specific proposal here? What are we asking them to vote on? And it's more general. It's everything. It's the buildings, the streets, and the public space that you see. It's the gut reaction you have when you see something like this. It's less specific and more, what's your feeling on this in general?
I'll give it just 5 more seconds. And now I will share the results. Great, so around 80% of people love it. Yet there are some people that either aren't sure yet or don't like it. As Jason mentioned, this isn't quite at a specific spot or a specific proposal yet. It's more of illustrating a concept of how buildings can create small public spaces, as well as how buildings can front parks and create really lovely public spaces and civic spaces. So as we go further in the planning process, we'll start being able to define where places like this will actually go, as opposed to just having these as concepts. All right, and the next question. What do you think of this idea? And this really gets at the idea of having clustered neighborhood clusters and different types of housing located along Highway 70, as well as elsewhere in the plan, such as the courtyard housing or garden apartments, and mixing those in with small areas of commercial. So I'm going to launch the poll. We'll wait a few more moments, see if anyone else wants to respond. All right, I think that's it. So we'll go ahead and share the results. On this one, 50% of the people love it, but there's quite a few people that aren't sure yet, and a few less that don't like it. So this idea is still very much, just a concept, and as we go further through plan refinement and come up with specific building types, it could better help to illustrate this idea And especially, an important part of this is how these buildings along Highway 70 interface with the neighborhood behind it and how that transition occurs. And so those are things that we'll have to keep looking at as we move forward in the process of designing Mesa Vista. All right, next question. So what do you think of this idea? In general, this is an image that Jason showed earlier of the proposed town center with the larger public open space and a series of smaller, more intimate plazas, three-sided plazas and paseos and alleyways connecting its way through from Mesa Grande to Highway 70. So in general, as your gut reaction to this concept and this idea for this type of town center, do you love it, not sure yet, or don't like it? And I am launching the poll right now. We'll wait maybe 10 more seconds. So we get a few more votes in. Okay, now I'm going to end the polling and share the results. All right, so that's pretty good. 2/3 of the people love it. About a quarter of those that voted aren't sure yet, and 10% don't like it. So the town center went through a lot of iterations over the course of this week through countless meetings and pinups and posting ideas, redrawing and redesigning. A lot of that was to accommodate the feedback and comments we got from the public meetings in terms of keeping heights relatively low so as not to obscure the view, having lots of plazas and spaces where you can have a place where you could park and then be able to go for a walk or a stroll and have a few different activities you can do, and you can spend an evening in the town center, and perhaps even from your home be able to walk or bike to it if you don't feel like driving. And there's still more work to do. This is still an early design, and hopefully we'll be able to make some further refinements and really fine tune it to something to get a really strong consensus on. We have just a few more of these. So we'll go to the next one. And for this image, again, the question is the same. What do you think of this idea? And just your gut reaction to having homes facing the street with street trees, sidewalks, wide sidewalks, on-street parking, instead of having the garages generally right up front. But it could be anything that you really comes to mind when you look at this image.
And just so you know, we're going to turn these images and the whole plan into an interactive experience on the website. So that way, you can say, I like this, but I don't like that. I like that tree, maybe not the architecture, whatever you want to react to. We'll have an opportunity to discuss this in depth in time.
All right, I'm going to end the polling and share the results. All right, so a little over half the people love it, but there's still around a quarter, 25% that don't like it, and some in the middle that still need to see perhaps what this could be with a variety of housing or how this would play out across the larger site. And so this is, this type of building in this way is really quite different from a lot of the other more recent developments you may have seen in Las Cruces, although it is very reminiscent of older, more traditional styles you'll find closer to the downtown. Right. Let's skip this one. And actually, oh, sorry. Too far. Right. So for this question, it's the Arroyo Trail section and the idea of preserving the arroyo and the flood zone, having the buffer and the trail. What do you think of this idea? Right. I'm going to end the poem and share the results. All right, well, that's great. So over 90% of the people love it and no one doesn't like it. So I think this speaks a lot to Sue's work on accommodating a lot of the feedback we got about how the arroyos would be protected, exactly where trails would be located, not necessarily down within the arroyo where flooding occurs, but up higher, and separating any of the housing and development from the flood areas. Just two more, and then we'll be at the final slides. So what do you think when you see this idea? The poll is live. Give it about 10 more seconds. In the poem and share the results. All right. 2/3 of the people of those in attendance love the idea of how the Arroyo section, the Arroyo Preserve section could actually look like. And then there's a little more mixed feelings on how it's actually shown. And so there's thousands of feet, miles of arroyos crossing the site. And so there's a lot of opportunity for different types of interface, always maintaining the flood zone and always maintaining the buffer, but the details will vary from place to place and neighborhood to neighborhood. All right. And that's all the polling questions for right now. And I'll turn it back over to Jason for the final few slides.
Well, don't leave us yet. There's still a question at the end. Is the plan headed in the right track? I just want to say, you know, we've been working in Las Cruces on and off for a long time now. I think, but this interaction this week has been really interesting. We've been talking to people about what's special about Cruces, you know, and a lot of it's very, very specific in particular, and only in New Mexico and only in Cruces. You know, and some of these items are common in places. In fact, they are the elements of building great place. Streets and infill, the mix of uses, parks, neighborhoods, natural features, shopping, preservation, and a density sufficient enough to support it. And these are pictures of, you know, one way or another, people have sent this picture or talked about one of these places and said we needed to study it. I think what the team did a good job of was incorporating these same ideas into the plans and into the designs. And a lot of these images are old Mesilla or downtown. There's never going to be a competitor to the downtown, to the plaza. There's never going to be a place like old Mesilla. Not exactly. There's too much history and specific local character. But yet we can take these things and we can turn them into the plan. Next slide. I see, especially in the town center. And again, this is the fact the city said we want a town center is why we took this project. I see parks and great streets. I see an opportunity to mix uses. I see shopping and small, cool restaurants. And I see great neighborhoods that people would be proud to be in. And I see something very different, really, from the downtown. Something a little modern, something a little new. But at the same time, I see a lot of the things that make the downtown or Old Mesilla or any other great places, you know, Santa Fe or Bisbee. I like Jerome's places in El Paso, they're just wonderful. I see some aspects of that here in this plan. And the last slide. Let's ask. Let's open up the poll.
All right, our last question of the night.
Do you think the draft, oh, sorry. We're both so excited. Go ahead, Rob.
All right. So do you think that the draft ideas presented tonight are on the right track? And let's get the polling launched. I'll give it just 10 more seconds to make sure that everyone that wanted to vote did vote. Important question. And I'll let Jason finish it up from here on out.
Well, that's awesome. 62% said yes and 15 said probably yes. So that's like 3/4 saying yes or probably yes. There's people who can't tell yet. You know, there's details to be worked out. There's, if you go to the next slide, there's questions remain. You know, even in this conversation, people have been talking. What's the total number of units? We haven't gotten to counting it yet, to be honest. Will the city accept this plan? What organization will take care of the trails and the vegetation? Will home buyers buy into something, this new concept? What tenants will the downtown attract? Let's just add while we're asking questions, you know, when's COVID going to be done? And what's the first concert we all get to attend together in the plaza? I don't know. This is kind of, we're off to a great start, it feels like, but in a lot of ways, this is still the start. So let me thank you all for your time tonight. Let me go to the last slide, and there's the website. You can watch this film or send it to someone else, and it's going to be very shortly on mesavistamasterplan.com. We're going to just give us a little bit of time here. We're going to take these images, we're going to put them on the website, and you can send links and like them or tweet them or follow them. And yeah, hey, thank you all for your hard work. Thanks to the team. It's been a fun experience, really. And thanks for the community. You know, for this event has been really well attended. People in Las Cruces really do care, and we learned a lot. So thank you all. Have a good night. Continue to follow the project at mesavistamasterplan.com. Have a good 3-day weekend. Stay safe, and we look forward to the next conversation.